your boy Dan here back with another book review. This one is Plato, The Last Days of Socrates. Socrates never wrote anything himself, so everything we have of him is written by other people, mainly Plato, who was his best student, who then went on to go write his own books, and that inspired Aristotle, and then that kind of inspired the Stoics, and so on and so on. Started it all. And this book is literally what it says. It's four manuscripts about the last days of Socrates. So it starts with the first chapter or the first book, Euthyphro, but it's basically this is four dialogues: Euthyphro, Apology, Credo, and Phaedo, and it covers Socrates' indictment, trial, and execution in Athens. Spoiler alert: he chose to die, and the core image I think, from the book is Socrates did not merely live by truth, he carried it like a stone, refused to set it down even when the weight became fatal. This book actually inspired me. So, my favorite of the four were actually the order they're written in, which, if you would have just given me a summary of them, I would have guessed backwards, like the exact inverse of it. But reading it, I found Euthyphro to be my favorite of the four, and it's probably the second shortest. So Socrates encounters this guy named Euthyphro outside the courthouse. Euthyphro claims to know what piety is. So piety is your your duty to God, I guess, is one way to say it. Maybe how religious you are or how holy you are. So Euthyphro, this guy, claims to know what piety is. Socrates, of course, tests that. And my favorite analogy dilemma in this whole book is in this manuscript. Is the pious loved by the gods because it is pious, or is it pious because it is loved by the gods? Meaning, he's questioning the essence of something versus attribution. Do things have value inherently, or is it attributed to some authority? And religion is this way, right? Like, is something religious, is it loved by the gods because it is like holy, the word holy. Is something considered holy because it's loved because the gods love it, or do the gods love it because it's holy by essence? And it made me search, and I went down quite a few rabbit holes through ChatGPT, and I came to the realization that Socrates believed, and the ancient Greeks did, and so did the Stoics, that we are ruled by the Logos, in other words, God, and that even before matter, there's the spiritual component to the universe as we know it is actually meaning. Meaning and then reason. Meaning would still be there, left to be discovered by conscious beings, aka humans. And in order for the universe to fully experience itself, consciousness had to come about. And you can go and like this gets very deep, but this is why this was my favorite manuscript of the four, and I didn't think it would be because it's about religion and dogma and what's holy versus what not. But is the pious loved by the gods because it is pious, or is it pious because it is loved by the gods? Very different from authority versus inherent. And the moment we realize Socrates is not trying to win arguments, he's trying to unearth the form of things, the truth behind what they actually are. It leads us to the last book in this, the last manuscript in this book. So Socrates, again, this whole pious thing, is it pious loved by the gods because it is pious itself, or is it pious because it's loved by the gods? The actual analogy Socrates did is something being carried because it is being carried, or is it being carried because someone carries it? And so it again brings up essence versus attribution. Do things have value inherently or by perception? And when I was reading this, I thought about a stone being carried. And that stone might be carried in order to build a house, in order to use as a weapon, in order to memorialize someone who just died. That stone does have meaning, but we don't carry it because a stone is not necessarily inherent to be carried, but we can carry it, and therefore it gets meaning in that sense. So, this is when you realize the difference between essence versus attribution. It gets deep. Like this is mind bending stuff. It's not things something you can just read lightly and then speed read through. And the Apology was the next book where he's on trial for corrupting the youth and impiety. He refuses to bend the knee. He says, I am, one of his famous quotes, I am the gadfly sent by the gods to sting the horse of Athens into wakefulness. The unexamined life is not worth living, maybe one of his most famous quotes. And he even proposes that instead of execution, he should be rewarded with free meals for life, like an Olympic hero. And this is actually the turning point of the book, in my opinion. Socrates is no longer just questioning the world, he becomes the immovable object within it. In a world terrified of discomfort, Socrates chose to embody it. And he didn't die for a cause, he lived by a method. And that method put him on a collision course with Athens. And Jordan Peterson's idea of carrying your cross, or even Nietzsche, who I've reviewed both of their books by both of them here on this channel, their image of becoming a lawgiver, like this inspires all of that philosophy that comes after. Like this is the inspiration to modern Western philosophy is really Socrates. The third manuscript was Crito, which he's a wealthy friend of Socrates, and he offers to bribe the guards to help Socrates escape. So if Socrates wanted to, he can escape with Crito, who's got bank. And Socrates refuses. And he says, one must never do wrong even in return for wrong. Do we say that we ought never to do wrong, or that we ought in some circumstances to do wrong? Or is doing wrong never good or noble? And so Socrates invents a form of proto-social contract theory. If you live under laws and benefit from them, you actually owe them loyalty. By the way, this philosophy is totally gone for modern day society. Imagine like, if you live under the laws and benefit from them, you owe them loyalty, even if you disagree with them. And then more deeply, he accepts the cost of consistency. He knows he could flee, but fleeing would mean that the logos, which I mentioned earlier, is only useful until it's inconvenient. So, we all have moments when the easy thing tempts us away from what's right. Socrates shows us how to stay still even when the tide turns. Finally, the last book, Phaedo, this is Socrates' final day preparing to drink the hemlock, which will kill him. The dialogue shifts into the metaphysics, the soul, the body, the death. What makes the soul the soul, the body the body? Is the soul immortal? Does it have multiple lives? The core idea, basically the body distracts us from the truth, whereas philosophy is a preparation for death and a purification process. So the body distracts us from truth in the form of either pleasure, going towards pleasure, or going away from pain, whereas philosophy is a preparation for death. It's a purification process, how to prepare to die and presumably to live well in the afterlife eternally through the soul. The crucial quote from this manuscript was, the soul that is impure is weighed down and dragged back into the corporeal world like a stone too heavy to float. For Socrates, this stone is not something to be held forever. It must eventually be released. He didn't see death as an erasure, but basically a culmination, the final refinement of his soul. And this is why Socrates dies with joy, not fear. He says, a man who truly practiced philosophy is right to be of good cheer when he is about to die. So again, the last days of Socrates is actually four manuscripts, all written by Plato: Euthyphro, Apology, Crito, and Phaedo. I think it's worth reading. This was actually my first writing or anything I read about Socrates, like directly. And it's also maybe one of my first Plato reads. I have The Republic next on my to-do list. Uh, well, right now I'm actually reading Epictetus Discourses, so expect a book review on that soon, and on Plato the Republic. Let me know what you think about this. Let me know if you've read it. I do think it's worth reading. Compared to most philosophy books, it was quicker because the way it's written is in like dialogues, and it's almost like reading a play. About 200 pages on my Penguin Classics translation. It is easier to absorb than say Nietzsche or Jordan Peterson Maps of Meaning or Meditations on the Tarot. It is easier to absorb, but it definitely a lot of places will make you think. You will go deep. For example, Epictetus, just a quick preview. It's a little harder to read in my opinion. Um, and same with letters from a Stoic, even though the ideas may seem more simple, they're actually not. Socrates and Plato, through Socrates's dialogues, was actually pretty easy to understand, although it takes some time to fully understand the meanings of what he said. I recommend it. Check it out. Let me know what you think. Bye bye.